Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Citizen Bear. This is a podcast covering the many topics and layers in my book, The Demonstrative Citizen, The Revelation of Two Dragons, and a lot of them today are become very relevant with current events, and I think it's important to go out and maybe talk a little bit about that and incorporate those two things. Citizen Bear comes from the name of one of the main character in the book, who becomes Bear. He takes on the name Bear in his great crusade, if you will. And I thought he really is a citizen, and he's a patriot, and he takes on this persona and does with others, many others, impossible things, and rises to the challenges that are put before him as a patriot. And he is a citizen, and he becomes Bear. So I've come up with the name Citizen Bear, and I think it's very relevant because we are citizens, and we are a nation of citizens. So, I think it's important to talk about it from that perspective, from Bear's perspective on a lot of things. I want to continue to discuss, and this is a multi-part group, on something that's kind of out there today and being banged around, and I think we all want to just look at the ground and stick our head in the sand on it, but hopefully it'll go away. But right now, we're looking at a lot of conversation about World War III, and I want to make that part of this multi-parts here, and we're going to do a second part on it today, and kind of titled this, A Fight Made for Us, and it also could be looked at as the enemy within. But I think it's also a very important reflection on just us in general as a people. So I want to continue on that topic today and kind of maybe look at it from a fresh perspective and a different point of view, how we might want to take a look at this. I'm going to skip in this episode, I want to skip the call and bold piece that I've kind of incorporated into so many of the previous episodes and just kind of get started because I need to lay a little foundation in place of that and talk about it. And it's important to remember that in the book, my friend Bear is faced with this. Even though he deals with it on our shores, he has incorporated it as part of a larger war, and it is really a World War III, although they don't quite talk about it that way, but it's very clear that this is a global conflict, and all nations are pressed to rise to the multi-fronts that are going on, which, by the way, is exactly what is beginning to evolve in our society today. So without further ado, let me get started. I want to start talking about John Locke. And for those of you who don't know who he is, he was a philosopher in the 17th century. But he was a very, very important and pivotal philosopher, really kind of the foundational father of political philosophy. Really, a lot of his work is incorporated into our founding fathers' efforts, into the building of this country, the Declaration of Independence. And Locke talked about a lot of the writings of Jefferson and Madison and many of other founding fathers really reflect Locke. And it's important, not entirely, but they really tap on Locke a great, great deal. And he's a very interesting read, and he had a lot of different things that I think we can talk about, and I've incorporated into a lot of our conversations in the past. So I think this is a good time to really roll Locke out and encourage people to take a look at him. For instance, let me just give you take a step back. And Locke, for instance, would have talked about, life, liberty, and and probably property, is where Jefferson talked about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Locke believed in a lot of the different aspects, like he really coined the term and believed in the idea of natural law, what Jefferson coined as the inalienable rights of men, that we live by certain rights as free people, and these rights are inalienable. So the ideals there are very much influenced and carried forward. And Locke's writings are very profound. They're very relevant today, and they're very important. As a matter of fact, I think one of the things that's really troublesome in our society is that for the last so many decades, we have begun to really move away from Locke. Locke believed in, by the nature of free society and having people with these rights and having property really controlled their society and had more influence over that society, and didn't really believe, therefore, in big government. And he felt big government was really problematic. It was the antithesis of free society, and the antithesis of maybe more accurately natural law. And he saw that government was a necessary evil, that's something that we really kind of needed but should be kept in check. And its primary focus was to preserve the rights of the people and to protect their property and their belongings and then their ability to live in a free society. So I think that's really, really important to kind of lay that foundation. And I encourage people to go out and kind of look at that. Look at Locke, and maybe you can read the Cliff Notes or whatever. But he's an interesting study. If you're interested in our Constitution and Jefferson, Locke is the guy you want to go read on. And he believed in the right of rebellion against if the social contract, if you will, totally broke down. And it's not something I'm preaching here at all, but I'm making the point that that's where Jefferson and others who were preaching this, really came up with a lot of their ideals, and felt very strongly and passionately grounded in the fact that they were just in pushing back on their government. Locke also really believed not just that the people had it, that more than just people. It was the fact that he briefly wrote about morality in society, and that moral virtue was really the basis of society, and that it really didn't matter about law, that the laws, of course we have a government, we have laws and things like that, but that is not where the true power of a society comes from. It is not derived from law, it is derived from the moral virtue of that society, the people. I think that let me step back. Locke wrote only briefly on morality. He wrote a couple of papers on it. His peers highly debated it, pushed back on it, and felt that it conflicted sometimes with his natural law talks and stuff for reasons of authority and power and divinity. I think in truth, Locke never really returned to the topic in his career and got on with his work. But I think the reason Locke didn't go back and argue it or press it further in morality as a basis of society was because it was a topic that hadn't ripened in the concept of natural law yet. I think he knew that a republic like ours had to come along and prove it out. And I think that is happening, and it has happened with our country, starting with the Pilgrims and incorporating a lot of their ideals and the moral basis of our founding fathers and everything, Christianity and all of these different things. And the right to religious freedom, people came to our shores for those purposes. They were persecuted in Europe. All of these things laid foundation for our founding fathers and our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution and our way of life. And I think that was something that Locke was waiting for to pan out into. And I think it's very important that we always take a look back. And it's something that I have spoken about in prior episodes. And I think that we're kind of connecting those two things here loosely. The one thing I would say on that, just food for thought, is I think a lot of philosophers get wrapped down in the authority and the power of it, and talking about divine authority when we start talking about morality and anchored in faith and everything. But in truth, I think that stems from love. And while love can be derived from God, but we are born with it. We have it innately, grows within us. It is nurtured in us People are innately capable of doing good. And we have seen that, and you don't have to be a Christian to follow and do good things, to see a need and fill it and take care of your fellow man. These are things that are innately in us, and we either are founded in love or we're not. And I think that when we look at moral values of our society, I think it's easier, instead of talking about the authorities for where philosophy goes, is just simply to say it is derived from that basis of love. That would be my argument on it, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who spend a lot of time arguing about that back and forth. I think this is a bit of a broad brush on Locke. I don't want to go in a deep dive here. It's something maybe we talk about more and encourage people to read on him. But the point is that this is a basis of our society, and it is something that we have begun to get away from. In many ways, we've begun to flip the script. So what's important here? Why does this really all matter? Why does Locke matter, a 17th century philosopher? And I think we've already incorporated some of that in the present when we say that it's incorporated in our form of government. When we look at World War III, we should understand that despite many classical reasons, the real purpose behind what I see as this emerging war and this emerging conflict is to not just unseat Western civilization as the leaders of the world order, but to wipe free society from the world too, to reimagine the world order in the name of authoritarian governments and an authoritarian mindset. And we have to remember that this goal is to destroy us as a society and to destroy free society. And so Locke's writings are important because we have to remember that these are foundational principles, and it is these foundational principles, including Jefferson's then later writings on our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. These concepts are exactly what they are attempting to use against us, and they are attempting to attack and undermine. When we attack the moral virtue, we see this in our society. We have turned gender upside down. We have turned many other aspects of our society upside down and inside out. It doesn't mean there are topics that we should dismiss. It just means that what we have seen in the name of those topics is the destruction of the moral values of our society, and we are attacking the principles of our society and what they are anchored in, and we attempt to turn them upside down. And this is a very, very important topic as we begin to move forward with what we're kind of taking a perspective on this. And this effort is a global effort. We are watching it globally being waged against the West and against free society, and it is both external and internal to our country and others. And I fear that this is something that has been going on for decades, and people have been utilizing the good qualities of our nations to turn it against us and attack these underpinnings of our society and really destroy us from within. Unfortunately, we've seen this in the far left of our country, and it's a little bit frightening, where we have seen a lot, and I'm not trying to pick on the Democratic Party because, again, I will say I do believe we need two parties, and I do believe in the push and pull between liberal and conservative that revolve around the center of our nation that moves us and keeps us grounded. But this is not that. This is an extreme movement in our country, and it is, as best I can see, hijacked the Democratic Party now and its leadership for probably a multitude of reasons, ranging from greed, power, to ideology. And I think that we have to be careful as we look back and we start to take stock in this. This has been creeping up on us for a long, long time. And I do believe that this is an all-out effort, and that there are people who are working within our country now, who have come to our country, are living in our country, who have illegally immigrated into our country to get here for other purposes. And again, I'm not picking on illegal immigration because I know there are a lot of people who want to come to America to start a new life. And I'm not against it. I think you should do it legally, but I understand that there are good people out there who are trying. But there are a lot, especially in the last 4 years under the last administration, a lot of bad actors who came into our country. And we are vulnerable. This is a time when people are really trying to do this. And we see young men of military age sneaking into this country, and they're lost. We don't know where they are. We have no reason why they're here. They come from countries where you don't sneak out, China. You didn't just come here, okay? They didn't let you out to come to America. It's just, without keeping a string on you. Not at all. There's something wrong. And we've seen this in kind of emulated in the neo-Marxist movement, Marxist movements. We've seen the attack on individual rights and censorship. We've seen people using anyone who wants to argue back, getting limited speech and personal attacks, almost to the point of thuggery with groups like Antifa. And we've seen the use of lawfare, and was just shocking. And I have to tell you, in my 61 years and being a guy that paid attention most of the time, what we saw with that lawfare and other things in this country, just breathtaking. That just doesn't happen. It shouldn't happen, but it did. And it needs to be ended. We've seen the false flag of, diversity, equity, inclusion that seek to destroy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we have to be careful about these things, because a lot of the time these are fine lines. We talked about fine lines and absolutes, and we should be careful about these things because they come veiled. Like a lot of evil, they come veiled as something good, but they're not. And we have to take stock in what we're losing and what we're giving up as opposed to what we're getting. We've seen the concept of destroying or attacking property and the ownership of property in our country, a foundational principle to Locke and a foundational principle to free society and the free market. We've seen the constant expansion of big government, something that is totally the antithesis of what Locke wrote about and wanted, and something that Jefferson and Madison and others in our founding fathers talked about and wrote about. It was never really supposed to be a government that ballooned to the size with the bureaucracy that it has now. And as a result of that, we see increasing laws and regulations that stifle our society over and over again in places in every aspect of our world, where it becomes almost impossible to live or to act. You're always on some level breaking a law unwittingly, and that can be used against you at any time they choose to use it against you. And that's not America. That's not a free society. That's more like a police state. But one of the most frightening changes of all that I think we've seen, and it's a conscious thing, is that in my life, in the last so many years particularly, this has really started to happen, is we've seen this change where people have this sudden obedience to government instead of insisting that government have obedience to the people. That is a very, very dangerous change, because once you become totally obedient to a big government ideal, you have already surrendered your rights. You can do whatever they can do whatever they want to you. And this has been put upon the American people slowly and harshly, and we can't always fault the American people in this. Like other people in other countries in the West, around the world, We've seen increased, because of economics, we've seen in difficult global economics and trade, we've seen people who have lost jobs and are now struggling and are dependent on the government and for other reasons too. There can be a multitude of reasons, and some of it's just choice, but they have become dependent on welfare programs and government agencies, and it becomes hard. So you become part of the system. And the larger the system becomes, the more people get drag-netted into that system. And and they become obedient to it because they're participating in it. And they think they're getting something for free, but they're really not getting much back. It's a lousy return on investment, but they don't want to see that. We've seen the middle class of this country just be absolutely devastated over the last so many decades, and young families now are struggling to even buy a home, let alone raise a family, and food prices and everything else have shot up with inflationary economics. And again, the use of lawfare and intimidation and the never-ending litany of laws, all of these things have caused people to knuckle under, kind of go about their business, and it's hard. I mean, look, let's be very honest. You're raising a family, you're trying to do your best. You don't want to have problems. And we become unsure because we become divided as a people, and we're not sure that we will garner the support that we need if we do come into a struggle with government. My friend Bear in the book, he gets to a point in society is in such a bad place, and they're dealing with an enemy force on their shores, and he kind of just he has to step outside all of the norms and start to do what he thinks is right. And he goes back to what you might consider pure natural law. And and probably the law of our founding fathers, and this concept that I have a right to go after this and defend my country and my home, my rights, my property. This kind of thinking becomes an insidious disease, and it leaves us in a position where an outside enemy need not tear down our defenses or break through the walls of the city, because we come to a point where the enemy within has so undermined us and so demoralized us and so forced us to capitulation. I'm thinking of the right word here. Has so brought us under their wing that we are indoctrinated us that we will simply open the gates to the city and welcome the invader in. We will have become them. And that is a dangerous, dangerous thing. And that is right out of Sun Tzu, if you want to know the truth of the art of war. Engage the battle after your enemy has already been defeated. And that is the real danger of the enemy within. I think one of the hardest things in all of this is we can talk about preparedness and we can talk about standing against this, and I want to talk about that a little bit in this next portion, but I want to really press a big idea on people, and that's mental toughness. One of the things about free society and our constitutional republic is you have to want it. You don't really you have to just want it bad. You have to believe in it. You have to believe that it is a better future for your children and for the world. It is hope for the world. And if we are not willing to be mentally tough for it and to fight for it and to demand our way of life, then we will lose it in time. And our enemy knows that. And so we must become resolved to the defense of our liberties, and we must become resolved to those enemies within. And it is disheartening who some of them are. And it is a little frightening because we are looking at a group who wants to change the world order. And they may have there may be differences in how some see that new world order, whether it is a Chinese kind of communist government or a confederation of countries that live under really more authoritarian rule, but it is a false democracy. I think that's just about the same thing. I don't really see the difference in that. I just think that's a matter of who wants to be in charge. That's all. Who thinks they believe have a right to be in charge of that. And as I said in the past, my idea is that we keep Plan C and just keep our messy constitutional republic. And one of the things we have to start looking at is we must start looking to the ballot box, looking to the jury box as citizens. We have to passionately start rejecting any political candidate who supports the enemy within. If you believe that bringing people into this country without any documentation is a good thing, you shouldn't even bother running for office. I'm sorry. If you're voting for communism and you're voting for other things in this country, you believe supporting radical Islam in our shores and Sharia law and all this other nonsense, if you think that's great and we should just, underwrite that with our tax dollars and everything else, you shouldn't even run for office anymore. We don't need you. It's utter insanity, and it is giving aid and comfort to an enemy who really, really wants to destroy our society. And it speaks very highly that anyone who supports that has wittingly or unwittingly joined that idea of destroying free society in this country and around the world. And we have watched it fall. And I think that it's easy to blame on bad leaders in many countries. I've talked about England and Germany and other places. And here in the United States, we've started down this road. We are the toughest nut to crack, but they're working at it. And it's easy to blame our leaders, and they justifiably deserve to be blamed if you want to know the truth. Because I think a lot of them took what was an idea to moving to a new world order and a new strategy, which turned into nothing but a giant bank robbery. And I think we've lived with this for just too long. But we have to take some blame here. Our choices matter, and our conduct matters. And if we allow candidates to do this, and if we endorse candidates, and I got to tell you, I blame the far left grandly, but I got to tell you, the Republican Party has their share of some of these people, some of these career politicians. No more. Done. If you want to do this, you want to support some of this stuff, don't even bother running for office, because we have to find a way back. We have to get back to some of our basics, because that is where our strength is, in our virtues, in our values, in our common needs and goals, our common care, in our desire for a better world, in our liberties. This is where our strength is. Moving away from it, going towards authoritarianism doesn't make us strong, it makes us weak. And ultimately, in the failing of, we must use, if we are going to use the ballot box, if we're going to use the jury box, and when I say the jury box, we must support each other. If it comes down to conflict or frustration or sides, we must take up the jury box, whether it be a grand jury or sitting in a jury box, and we must support people who are acting as patriots. I'm sorry. If you are within the law and you're taking care of your family, you're taking care of your country, then if you're speaking on behalf of the right thing, God bless you. You got my support. I don't care what the district attorney thinks. And I have to, or what big government thinks. I don't want to convict you, okay? And we have to send that message, and we have a power. There's a reason we have a jury box, because we're supposed to be in it. And we don't have to listen to this nonsense that you just have to just do what we tell you. No. We'll do what we think is right. How about that? And ultimately, if that fails, and if we fail with the soapbox, God bless us. Let us hope it never is necessary. But against an enemy, internal, external, no matter who they are or where they are, we do possess the ammo box. And our founding fathers made sure that we did. And that is very much in keeping with Locke's writings. We must demand that government get back to the basics of defending our rights and the property of the people. In many ways, our government today does exactly the opposite. It's why young people can't afford a home. It's why we see people being enriched who go to government. You're making $179,000 a year and you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. How does that work? I know that there are certain avenues for that through political donations and stuff, but you know what? There's something wrong, very wrong. It used to be that people went into politics for a different reason. Truman said, I believe it was, that you show me a man who got rich in politics and I'll show you a crook. And there's a lot to be said for that, because we have become focused around that concept and stopped being focused about protecting the rights of people. So we should not be surprised when things like censorship and lawfare and other aspects of our lives are being, bureaucracy is clamping down on our lives. We shouldn't be surprised by that at all, because we've allowed it. And we need to vote these people out. And we need to push back on it. And it doesn't take a lot. You go into the voting booth and you just say, I don't care. I'm not putting up with it anymore. I'm not voting for you if you're doing that. I don't know what the other guy is going to do, but I know he ain't going to do that. And maybe we do need to look at independent candidates sometimes. It's not a bad idea. One of the areas that I also think that is very strong and out there is we can't allow people to – there is this concept amongst many who wish us harm, especially some of these people like the Islamic terrorists and some of the Chinese, radicals that now are seeing where they're trying to imitate police and doing stuff like that and assert themselves in our country. And there are other nationalities too. I'm not picking on anyone, but there are a couple of highlights. They don't understand our society, and what they do understand is authoritarianism, and they push it out there, and they conduct themselves in that concept. Force makes right, and that's not how our society works. They mistake our decency and our tolerance for weakness. This is a terrible mistake. The American people are a very patient and generous people, and they're very tolerant. Tolerance is what our society is about. But tolerance is never, ever an absolute to defending our rights and defending our liberties. We will always defend our rights, and we should always defend our rights and our liberties on every level. I saw a video. I want to expand on this. I saw a video. It was a young man who was living in America. Can't imagine why he's here. He was pronouncing Sharia law, and he was talking about, destroying America from within, and he was talking about how we did not realize just how many people like him there are in this country who are willing to die for their cause. My response to that is, you don't know how many people in this country are willing to kill you for theirs. That's what you call a win-win, huh? This is not how a society should run, but do not underestimate the American people's willingness to fight for their rights. Do not mistake tolerance for weakness. There are places where people are enabling this, and I've seen the far left do it. And you get away with this living in far left cities. That's not tolerance. That's giving aid and comfort. But I will tell you, we must begin to force people. If you're here on a visa and you're talking like that in our country, hit the bricks. We need to send you home. I know that sounds terribly harsh, but we have to stop seeing the enemy within as some kind of, rainbow kind of unicorn social problem. Something where we need to understand. I know these people are not warriors. They're not soldiers. They're criminals. And they come here with a criminal mentality. They want to hurt people, and they've been given a reason to do it. They're terrorists. Okay. They're not patriots. They're nothing. But they can hurt people, and they look to disrupt, and they're here to wreak chaos, and they're here to do harm on every level. They're here to undermine your system and attack your values in every way, shape, and form. And that is not acceptable. That is not tolerance. That is complacency. That is capitulation. It is cowardice. And we cannot afford that anymore in this country. And so we must rally every level of our government, from the people to the highest echelons of our government and the police and everything else, to stop these people and push them out. And we must push out politicians who enable it, wittingly or unwittingly, support this. because it's not a good formula. And we don't need people shooting us in the back while we're fighting an enemy externally. You know, the American people don't seek this conflict. They really don't. It always amazes me how the American people, you hear guys out there talking a good story, but they're really very peaceful people, and we want to go out and do our thing. We have a lot to live for, even in tough times, and we want to do and have a better life, and that's really the goal here. And so when I hear a young man coming here and talking and spewing hate, I would have to say to him, why don't you try taking on a concept of being founded in love and start working on that and start finding some of the good things here? Maybe you might find a new way forward for yourself instead of just looking to tear things down. So I think it is important that we have the mental toughness, the wherewithal, the determination, the conviction in our values and in our society to return to this. And we must remember that some of the hardship that we have faced is not because of our values. It is because of a lack of our values that politicians who we trusted have promoted in the wrong way. And we have to get back to the right concepts and adhering to our Constitution. And we need to start getting people out of here who don't want to adhere to that. You can have new ideas. You can talk about that. That is free society. But when you wish it harm, when you want to hurt it through the wrong means, and you want to hurt the people through the wrong means, and you attack the concepts, I'm sorry, your religious freedom doesn't allow you to kill other religious or people or to deny them their religious rights. That's not religious freedom. That's authoritarianism. Well, whatever you want to call it under a religious concept, theocracy. So I want to kind of wrap this up with a couple of thoughts and hopefully move on here so we can talk about some other things. And I don't want to, by walking away from it, minimize the enemy within, because I think it is one of the most important topics to the concept of World War III. And I think the best way we can push back as a people is to no longer accept this intolerance within our country and allow this kind of degradation of our society from anyone, including our elected officials. You know, Locke rightly believed that the strength and true power of a society does not lie in its government, its laws, its regulations, and so on, but rather the moral values of its people. These values help us to see government actions as just or unjust, and will thereby guide our actions in adhering to government. So in the end, government depends on a consensus of the people. We shouldn't underestimate our power, the people's power, but through consensus, through just the strength of the ballot box and the jury box, the soap box, and even the coin box, as I've said before, to expand on Frederick Douglass's original quote, ideal, that, we depend on that consensus of how our social contract is being maintained and how it is being utilized and how we are benefiting from it or not. This is what the enemy within our society is attacking on virtually every level of our society. And we must dismiss these hateful people as we have throughout time. I think in keeping with that, I think it is important that we reestablish, I say it again and again, but we have to get back to our basics. And we have to start caring for each other in a positive way. And these failed political ideologies and everything else, we have no patience for it all. We've seen some of the greatest cities in the world turn into homeless shelters. I mean, it's just shocking where a city like San Francisco has gone under this kind of leadership. And there are others. Let it be clear to those who have come here and are founded in hate. Long before and long after you deal with our wonderful police and our National Guard, even our military, you are going to deal with the people. You're going to deal with us. You're going to deal with what I call the great American militia. And they will kill you, and they will destroy you. Make no question. They are armed. They are capable. You're not the first guy to have a gun. You're not the first guy to have a cause. We don't seek that. We don't want that. But if you bring it upon us, make no question. I have no doubt the American people will rise to that challenge. Do not tempt fate on that. Do not destroy yourself. Find a better way forward. Because if you underestimate the American people, if you underestimate the great American militia, I guarantee you it will end badly. And we have been doing that for hundreds of years. This ain't our first clam bake. This is something that's bred in the bone. We wrote the book on this, okay? Finally, I want to leave us all with a warning. And I want to invoke another philosopher here, Friedrich Nietzsche. And I like a very common quote that comes from his book, Beyond Good and Evil. And the quote is, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And when you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you." With everything that I have talked about and everything that I have pressed on, from the jury box to the soapbox to the ballot box and even the cartridge box, to every level of our society, from the lowliest person to the mightiest and highest of offices, as we face the hate that seeks to harm us, we must all do all that we can to defeat it completely, both internally and externally. However, we must also be sure that in the final analysis, we do not allow the price of victory to be the destruction of free society in the world by our own deeds. And by that I mean we must be prepared to check ourselves at all times. Yes, we are more than capable of fighting back. We are more than capable of defending ourselves. I have no doubt about our military being the greatest military on the face of the earth. And I have no doubt about the American people being the greatest people in the face of the earth, and a righteous people. And I have no doubt about the great American militia that stands at the core of our society. But we must always make sure that as we go about defeating such an enemy, we cannot win at any cost, because that would give a victory to our enemies. Even if we defeat them, they will have destroyed us anyway. And that is a warning we must always take care of before we are so willing to jump out and get involved and get into this. We must be headstrong. We must be fortified in our body, our mind, and in every other aspect against these people. But make no question, whether it is an external enemy or an internal enemy, in this fight, we must come out a free and better society for it. So next week, we're going to move on. We're going to do some other things. We're going to talk about this concept a little bit more, not about the enemy within, but about maybe the external enemy. And it's about some preparedness ideas and about some thoughts about what each of us can do and what we should do and what's going on in our world. And eventually I want to move on to a couple other topics then, because I think, we all have our ideas on this, and it's going to follow its course. And there are things we can and we cannot do as a people, as governments move forward and people move forward. And unfortunately, our enemy gets a vote. I know if it was up to our leaders, particularly the current administration, we would have peace, but that is not necessarily the vote of our enemies. And our enemies want, it is not just war they want. They want to unseat us and to destroy free society. They want to change the world order, and they want to use war to do it. And we have to be prepared for the fact that That is why they so stubbornly want to push forward with a war that does nothing for them, but it may help destroy us. And I think that's probably one of the sickest ideas I've heard for war in a long ever. So we should take heart and make sure that we do not win at all cost. We must maintain our values, our morals, our free society, our virtues. So move off this dreary topic and let's see if we can get into something a little more fun next week. Thanks for watching.